In this video, we're going to try turning an abandoned shipping container that's completely useless into one of the best workshops you'll ever see in your life. So make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. You can actually find a shipping container like this on eBay for just a few $1,000s, and it's perfect if you want to build something to store your equipment or even set up a small workshop. That's because the width is usually around 8 feet and the length is about 20, making it an ideal size for a project like this. Some crazy people even use several containers to build an entire house out of them. The first thing our guy here is going to do is choose where to place the container. He decided to set it up in the backyard of his house. So he started by cleaning the grass and clearing the area to get it ready for installation, removing all the unnecessary parts. He marked the exact spot where the container would be placed so that when it arrives, it can be dropped directly into position. He did that by laying down 2 wooden planks cut to the same dimensions as the container and securing them properly on the grass to make sure the measurements stay accurate. Then he began clearing the backyard area and created a small ramp so the truck could drive up when it arrived. After that, they waited for the container to arrive safely. Once it did, he had the driver back the truck into the exact marked spot, the same one they had prepared earlier for unloading. But then he noticed smoke coming from the truck. It turned out that instead of driving up the ramp, the truck was climbing onto the curb itself, which caused the tires to burn due to the extra friction. Still, he didn't give up. He kept trying again and again, determined to make it work. He cleared the dirt on the ground and kept adjusting until finally, on the last attempt, it worked. The truck managed to climb up and they successfully unloaded the container. It was a tough and exhausting process, but honestly, it was totally worth it. The container then started to unload slowly, piece by piece, from the transport truck. The truck itself had a built-in hydraulic system at the base that allows it to easily lower containers or any other heavy objects. And just like that, thankfully, the shipping container was safely delivered. You could really see the marks on the ground after all the effort it took to get the container in place. The container was resting on wooden blocks, but it needed proper support. So he began cutting new pieces of wood to precise lengths and sizes for it to sit on. Then he brought out a standard car jack, but one designed to handle heavy loads, the kind you'd use for lifting pickup trucks or SUVs with ease. After lifting the container with the jack, he removed the old wooden pieces from underneath and replaced them with the new ones he had just cut. Then he slowly released the jack so the container could rest on the new wood. One added benefit of using that rounded wood was that indirectly it acted like makeshift wheels for the container. He also wanted the container to be placed right up against the garden fence. To move it into position, they needed a powerful vehicle. So they attached a chain to the container and brought in a mighty Dodge Ram with a V8 engine, perfect for this kind of heavy-duty job. They needed a vehicle with strong torque to pull the container since it weighed about 4,000 pounds, roughly 2 tons. The Dodge started pulling, and it did the job smoothly. The container slid into place, lined up perfectly with the garden fence, and the area was secured. After that, they used the jack again to reinstall the original wooden blocks underneath, helping to stabilize the container completely so it wouldn't move or wobble at all. That's important because those rounded wooden supports could make the container shake easily when you're inside, which would mess up the balance. Soon after, the order for the container's interior materials arrived. Let's take a look at what came in that delivery. The shipment included extra wall panels designed to be installed inside the container. These panels act as an added internal layer, serving several purposes. First, if you want to hang anything inside, you can drill into these panels instead of drilling directly into the metal frame of the container itself. Secondly, it's obviously about the appearance. This extra layer looks so much better. From the inside, it will make a huge difference compared to the old, rough look of the container. And thirdly, and most importantly, It's for insulation. The insulation will be extremely useful, especially because it helps block out the noise from the tools and prevents any loud sounds from escaping the container or vibrating through the metal structure itself. He then started unpacking the boxes and taking out the panels that would be installed along the container's walls. After that, he began preparing the surfaces and applied a special type of adhesive designed to bond to metal surfaces. He didn't use screws, of course, to avoid damaging the container's frame. With great focus, he started attaching the panels, one after another and then another. The process took quite a bit of time, but he didn't give up and kept going until he had glued panels across the entire interior wall. Once finished, he had a complete wall section in place. He repeated the exact same steps on the opposite side, measuring, cutting the wall panels precisely, applying adhesive both on the container's metal surface and the back of the foam panels, ensuring maximum grip. The advantage of this adhesive is that once it sets, it's nearly impossible for the panels to come off. They hold incredibly firmly. He continued placing them one by one until the entire opposite wall was done as well. Then he measured the small gap between the original wall and the newly installed one, cut all the remaining panels with millimeter precision, and installed them all at once to save time and ensure perfect alignment. These artificial wall panels are made of foam, which makes them strong, durable, and visually appealing at the same time. He applied plenty of adhesive, the kind that expands like foam, to fill in all the gaps and seal everything tightly. With that, the first side was completed beautifully. He followed the same approach on the other side, finishing it just as neatly. Along with the first order, a second shipment arrived as well. This one also contained foam panels, but of a different type. These were meant for the other two sides of the container, each measuring around 8 feet wide. The container sides have long vertical grooves, and these foam panels were designed to fit perfectly into those spaces.
So, the idea behind this step was to completely seal those grooves. A special type of adhesive was applied in long, vertical lines across each foam strip, and then the pieces were carefully placed into the empty spaces. Around 8 pieces were installed like this. After that, there was still a small gap left at the top. For that, he cut smaller foam sections to the exact size needed and installed them above to complete the overall look. Next, he brought in thinner foam pieces for the corners, a crucial step since the corners are very important for stability and insulation. He made sure to fit them neatly, cutting long, narrow strips that perfectly filled and sealed the corners. The same process was repeated on the opposite side. Then, he used the same type of foam panels as before to cover the other 8-foot wall, ensuring that no gaps were left anywhere inside the container. Each piece was cut precisely to the correct measurement, fitted tightly, glued firmly, and followed again by the corner strips. And yeah, I know you're probably getting tired of hearing about all these foam panels, but trust me, once this stage is done, we'll move on to the really exciting part. He then grabbed another set of long foam panels to fill in the gaps in the ceiling. This step was a bit trickier since every single piece had to be firmly secured. If the adhesive wasn't applied properly, the panels could fall off later. So he measured, cut, and divided each piece carefully before installing them in the ceiling, one after another, until the entire surface was covered. The next step, as you might have guessed, was to attach the large ceiling panels. But these were installed in a slightly different way. Once the adhesive was applied, 2 panels were lifted and pressed into place simultaneously. They had to be supported by wooden beams to hold them up until the glue fully set, especially since this foam was thicker and heavier than the previous type. Finally, he took small filler pieces and wedged them tightly between the ceiling and the new foam layer, reinforcing the structure. He continued this process across the entire ceiling until it was fully covered. Then, he waited a little while to let the adhesive dry and set completely. After the adhesive had fully dried, it was finally time to remove the wooden beams that had been holding everything in place. Once that was done, he moved on to working on the doors.
Using the same type of foam, he cut, shaped, and glued pieces onto the door's interior surface, essentially wrapping it from the inside. He carefully covered every section until the entire door was fully insulated. Then he did the same thing for the second door, filling any remaining gaps with additional foam to make sure everything was perfectly sealed. The final step for this phase was to clean up the whole workspace, getting it ready for what came next, the heavy-duty stage I've been telling you about. The first thing he did was measure the area precisely. Then he brought in a large wooden plank, marked it, and cut off the unnecessary part. This plank would be installed horizontally across the ceiling and secured firmly using screws. After that, he brought in additional wooden pieces using the same idea, but this time they were installed vertically, as if they were supporting the top beam. In reality, though, their purpose was to create a frame or a kind of entrance structure, which he fastened solidly to the wall using screws and brackets. Then he took another wooden plank of the same length and installed it directly opposite the first one. Next, he reused the leftover wooden scraps that were originally meant to be discarded. He placed them between the two main planks and tightly screwed them together. He even added a smaller piece of wood slightly higher up in the same area for extra reinforcement. On the opposite side of the container, he repeated the exact same process. Same wood, same structure, same steps. L-shaped metal brackets were then added to strengthen the corners and joints. He then placed another horizontal plank across the top, connecting both sides together, and filled the remaining small gaps with more wooden pieces to create a sturdy, framed section. Now, I know this might sound a bit confusing, but just stay with me, because once it's done, it'll all make sense. What he was actually building here was the frame for a door. Yes, that's right, this would become a glass door for the container. He carefully brought it in and fitted it precisely within the wooden frame, making sure it was properly aligned and secured. This type of door slides sideways rather than opening inward or outward, so it needed to be installed in a way that allowed it to move smoothly along its track. Finally, he fixed the door firmly in place with strong screws that anchored it to the wooden beams at the top and along all the sides, ensuring it was perfectly stable and functional.
He also filled in any small gaps that were left around the door frame. Then, he grabbed a spree cleaner to wipe the glass thoroughly, removing all the dust and marks that had collected on it, cleaning both the front and back sides. And with that, the glass door was finally finished, looking perfect. Now, moving on to the next part. The foam we installed inside the container was just an extra layer. As you probably know, foam itself isn't strong enough to hold or support anything heavy, meaning you can't hang objects directly on it. So, to solve that problem, he came up with a new plan: to build a solid protective layer that would reinforce the container's interior walls while also providing excellent insulation. For that, he decided to use drywall, gypsum board panels. He brought them in, measured and cut each one precisely to fit, and began attaching them to the first wall. Using screws, he started fixing the boards directly into the foam layer, making sure each one was perfectly secured and tightly in place. He repeated the same process on all sides of the container, carefully installing each board next to the foam layer. The black sections you see here are actually metal frames where the drywall sheets are mounted, giving extra support and alignment. After a lot of work, both side walls were finally completed, 100% done. Now, moving on to the ceiling part was much more challenging. The foam panels had been relatively light, but these drywall sheets were significantly heavier, which made installation tougher and required more precision. Because of that, he decided to ask for help and used a wooden beam to hold the panels up during the process. He brought out a set of screws and began securing the new ceiling panels one by one. The section you're seeing here was the very first part completed. Then he moved on to the next area, applying the same method and continuing carefully until everything was firmly in place. He kept repeating these steps patiently until the entire ceiling was fully covered. At this point, the entire container was completely insulated and lined, every wall, the ceiling, and even the doors.
For the door area, he filled in all the small gaps with the same drywall material, then took the opportunity to cover the container doors as well, attaching drywall panels directly over the wood to hide it completely and give the interior a clean, uniform look. He repeated the same process across every section until the entire space was fully covered. And this is how it looked once everything was finished. Take a look at the before and after. It's a huge transformation. Now let's move on to the putty stage. He brought out a container of wall putty, mixed it thoroughly, and began applying it over all the surfaces. The purpose of applying putty before painting is to hide the screw marks and smooth out any uneven areas. This creates a thin, clean finishing layer on the walls. Of course, he had to apply putty all over the container. So he grabbed a putty knife, stirred the mixture well, and began spreading it over all the small gaps and screw holes. After leaving it for a bit to dry slightly, he applied masking tape in square shapes, almost as if he was dividing the walls into sections, before continuing with another layer of putty. He kept working patiently, covering every inch of the interior until the entire space was coated smoothly. Then came the sanding stage. He started sanding down the walls to make them completely smooth. It created a mess, of course, with dust everywhere, but he kept going carefully over every wall and surface, step by step, until the finish was perfectly even. Right after that, he cleaned the whole place again, since the sanding had left the entire container full of dust. He brought out a vacuum cleaner, turned it on, and began removing all the dust and debris from every corner. Once the place was spotless, it was time to move on to the next stage. He got a ladder, climbed up, and began taking measurements across the top section of the container to ensure everything was precise. Then he brought out a power cutter and started cutting through the marked areas. What he was creating here was an exhaust fan opening, designed to release smoke and improve air ventilation inside the workshop. After cutting through the metal from the outside, he moved inside the container and began cutting through the foam insulation in a square shape to match the opening. With just a couple of strong pushes, he managed to break through completely. Now the opening led directly outside. Then he stepped back outside once again to trim away the excess foam around the hole, cleaning it up neatly and preparing it for the next step.
Using a utility knife, he trimmed the edges neatly, then brought out this very distinctive metal frame and began installing it from the outside, just like a window frame. He marked the area carefully, measured it precisely, and drilled holes for the screws. Once that was done, he successfully fastened the screws in place. Then, from the inside, he mounted the same type of frame, aligning and securing both together perfectly. After that, he took the fan, which was designed to extract air, and mounted it inside the new window-like opening. He then stepped outside again to finish tightening the exterior screws. Once everything was securely attached, he went back inside and fitted another metal frame around the fan edges to cover any visible gaps. Finally, he tested the fan, and thankfully it worked flawlessly. Without wasting time, he grabbed the ladder again and climbed up to the outer side of the container. He started marking and measuring another opening identical to the one made for the first fan. Then, using the power cutter, he began cutting through the metal surface and removed the foam insulation behind it with a knife, cleaning off all the excess material. He repeated the same steps as before, applying metal adhesive foam around the edges, trimming away the extra bits with a knife, and preparing the surface for installation. Then he brought out a vent pipe, positioned it on the outer wall, and carefully cut out a space for it. After fitting it perfectly, he secured it tightly in place. Everything looked neat and solid. Next, he moved to the other side of the container. As usual, he used the power cutter to create the second opening, removed the metal section, and cut away the foam with a knife. Then he placed the second vent pipe in position and began drilling holes with a power drill to attach the screws. Once all the screws were in, he painted them black for a clean finish. From the inside, he installed the inner cover of the vent, completing both exhaust systems successfully. At this point, the container was roughly 70% finished. Moving inside, he brought in a carpet-like flooring, laid out 3 large pieces to cover the entire space, and fixed them in place using long strips of adhesive tape along the edges. Then he prepared the paint, mixing the colors thoroughly, before grabbing a paintbrush and starting to paint, covering the walls, ceiling, and every single corner with careful, even strokes.
The first coat of paint was applied in white, serving as a base layer. Then came the second coat, which could be painted in any color of choice, as long as the white base had been applied first. After that, he took some masking tape and ran it along the length of the container to create a clean division between two different colors. This gave the container a dual-tone design that looked both stylish and well-balanced. Next, he brought in several wooden boards to start building shelves inside. It took a considerable amount of time and effort, but he managed to install multiple shelves to store all the tools and equipment he regularly uses. These racks allowed him to keep everything organized and even hang some tools when needed. Afterward, he picked up more wood and metal brackets, attached them securely to the metal frame, and fastened everything with screws. He repeated this process on both sides of the container. Then he cut an opening in the floor, added metal reinforcements, and fixed them firmly to serve as support bases. Once the structure was stable, he proudly mounted his channel logo on the container's exterior, giving it a personal and professional touch. He then cut an opening on the outer wall to install the electrical wiring, ran the cables inside, and sealed all the openings neatly. He installed PVC conduits throughout the container to run the wiring for the power outlets, placing sockets along the shelves, walls, and every corner. This setup ensured that no matter which tool or machine he wanted to use, there would always be a power outlet nearby. After that, he fixed the faceplates on all the sockets, completed the wiring in the ceiling, and added metal conduits for extra protection. Finally, he connected the lighting cables, tested the system, and the lights turned on perfectly, bright and flawless. Everything was functioning just as planned. Once he finished sealing all the wiring and tightening the last sockets, the project was complete. In the end, the transformation was remarkable. Just take a look. This was the before, and this is the after. Through this challenge, he turned what was once a useless shipping container into a comfortable, livable, and functional workspace. So, tell me, did you like how it turned out? What part of the container impressed you the most? And if there's anything you didn't like, let me know in the comments. And with that, our video comes to an end. Bye.